My name is Lena Harper. I was 32 years old the winter my life fractured like thin ice on a deep, hidden lake quietly at first, with only the faintest cracks spreading beneath the surface, and then with a resounding break that echoed through every corner of my existence for months afterward. That winter did not announce itself with thunderous tragedy or sudden catastrophe. It arrives softly, the way true Alaskan cold seeps through the tiniest gaps in your defenses, settling deep into your bones until the chill becomes part of you, impossible to shake. It all began in a sterile lawyer's conference room in Fairbanks, where the air hung heavy with the scent of burnt coffee, old paper, and unspoken tensions. My parents had vanished into the remote Tanana country many months earlier. Now, a thick manila folder lay open on the polished wooden table like a final, unyielding judgment. Ryan, my older brother by 7 years, received a gleaming $2.5 million waterfront mansion in Miami's undrenched walls, palm trees swaying in the breeze. The kind of property that radiated effortless success even from a simple photograph. I received something far different, a weathered, isolated cabin and the vast section of wild land surrounding it, situated 150 miles north of the nearest road or sign of civilization, in a place so remote and unforgiving that people only ventured there when they had absolutely no other choice. Attorney Sophia Langford read the terms aloud in a calm, measured voice that somehow made the weight of the moment feel even heavier. I sat motionless in my chair, my hands folded tightly in my lap so that my knuckles turned white from the pressure. Beside me, Tyler, my fiancé of 2 years, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His hand, which had held mine with some semblance of support when we first entered the room, had grown increasingly slack and distant as the reading progressed. By the time we stepped out of that conference room into the crisp Fairbanks air, the emotional chasm between us already felt insurmountable. A gulf that no amount of words could bridge. That same week, in the quiet confines of his apartment in Fairbanks, Tyler finally unleashed what had clearly been festering inside him. "You're a pathetic loser, Lena," he said, the words landing like a sharp slap across frozen skin, cold, stinging, and impossible to take back or forget. I didn't argue with him. I didn't allow myself to break down in front of him. Instead, I simply slid the engagement ring off my finger, placed it gently on the kitchen counter with a small, decisive click that seemed to echo in the silence, and walked out into the biting night. The air outside felt cleaner, sharper, and more honest than anything I had breathed inside that apartment. I drove the long, treacherous road back to Willow Ridge through stretches of black ice and swirling snow that reduced visibility to almost nothing. My father called me one Tuesday afternoon from what I imagined was a crackling satellite phone. His voice was warm and steady, carrying the same reassuring tone that had guided me through childhood lessons on reading animal tracks in fresh snow or predicting weather from the shape of clouds. "We're heading up to the Tanana land for the winter, Lena," he said casually. "Just your mother and me this time. No phones, no regular radio check-ins. You know how it is out there in the country." I wasn't overly worried at first. Not really. Elias Harper had been disappearing into the vast Alaskan wilderness for as long as I could remember. He would vanish for months, on end and return with the spring thaw looking renewed and invigorated, his eyes bright with tales of massive caribou herds thundering across the tundra, northern lights dancing like living curtains of fire across the sky, and a silence so profound it could rearrange the very way you thought about existence. He had grown up in that rugged country, and it lived in his blood and bones the way precise survey lines, boundary markers, and topographical maps lived in mine. My mother, Claire, always quieter and more practical in her ways, joined him on these extended journeys every few years. They would come back in the spring with frost, still clinging to their hair and laughter, warming their voices, carrying bundles of smoked fish, bundles of stories, and a quiet contentment that seemed to sustain our family through the darkest months. So when the first heavy snows blanketed Willow Ridge and transformed the world into an endless sea of white, I tried my best to carry on as normal. I continued running my small but steady surveying business from a modest one-room office above the hardware store on Main Street. The space always carried the comforting, familiar smells of fresh coffee, printer ink, and aged wood. Clients would come in with complicated boundary disputes, potential mining claims, or questions about land their families had stewarded for generations. I measured, mapped, documented, and advised. It was honest, grounding work that connected me to the land in the same way my father had taught me. But as September faded into December and December surrendered to the harsh, unrelenting grip of January, the silence from the Tanana region began to feel heavier and more ominous than in previous years. The creek behind my house groaned and cracked under the thickening ice each night, sounding like some restless, living creature stirring in pain. I often found myself standing at the window for long, lonely stretches, unconsciously searching for the faint scent of wood smoke, mixed with spruce needles that existed only in my memories. The house felt too empty, too quiet. My father's absence had carved out a hollow space inside me that I didn't know how to fill. By February, the cold had become a tangible, living presence in every aspect of life. Temperatures plunged to 40 below zero and stayed there. My breath froze instantly on my eyelashes the moment I stepped outside to fetch more wood. I kept the old wood stove burning late into the night, its crackling flames the only sound besides the wind howling outside. As I read through old survey texts and tried not to dwell too long on the empty chair at the kitchen table, where my father used to sit and tell stories. Then, in the second week of April, when the days were still short and the cold still brutal, the thick envelope arrived from Sophia Langford's office, the letter that changed everything. The envelope was heavy with implication, the paper thick and formal. I sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour, staring at it before my fingers finally broke the seal with a crackle that sounded like breaking ice. The words inside were precise, legal, and devastating in their clinical clarity. My parents had established a living trust years earlier. They had pre-signed every transfer document, deeds, assignments, everything notarized and ready. If they remained unreachable past April 1st with no confirmation they were alive, the trust would execute automatically according to their explicit instructions. No one knew whether they were still alive or had been claimed by the wilderness. I called Sophia Langford the next morning. Her voice was steady, professional, and practiced the tone of someone who had guided countless families through sudden, unexpected loss. She explained the mechanism they had built with meticulous care, ironclad, intentional, and completely beyond her power to override. They designed it this way on purpose, Miss Harper, she told me gently but firmly. I argued passionately. I pleaded for more time. I reminded her of my father's long, storied history of disappearing into the bush and always returning with the spring. April 1st held no real meaning in that unforgiving country. She listened with patience but held her ground. The formal reading of the trust would take place in Fairbanks with the entire family present, exactly as my parents had specifically requested. The days leading up to the reading blurred together in a haze of anxiety, sleepless nights, and restless pacing. I replayed every conversation I had ever had with my father about land, legacy, responsibility, and the sacred duty of stewardship. He had always said the same thing, his voice low and serious. The land isn't ours to spend. Lena, we're only keeping it warm for those who come after us. The conference room in Fairbanks smelled of stale coffee, tension, and the faint mustiness of old carpet. Ryan arrived from Miami looking distinctly out of place in his thin designer coat, ill-suited for the Alaskan chill. His wife Brooke sat beside him like a polished, elegant accessory, her sunglasses remaining uneven indoors. Tyler held my hand when we first sat down, but his grip felt increasingly distant and obligatory. Sophia Langford read the distribution clearly and without unnecessary emotion. Ryan received the Miami waterfront mansion, valued at $2.5 million, free and clear. I received the remote cabin in the Tanana drainage, along with the surrounding section of land, essentially a shack surrounded by endless snow and wilderness. Ryan let out a short laugh of pure, visible relief. Tyler's face tightened with obvious disappointment and frustration. I sat in complete silence, absorbing the blow while something deep and powerful inside me began to stir and awaken a quiet strength I hadn't fully known was there. That night, back in Tyler's apartment, his true feelings poured out in a torrent. The argument that followed was raw, ugly, and final. When he called me a pathetic loser who deserved nothing but a frozen shack, something inside me broke cleanly and irrevocably. I left the ring and the remnants of the relationship behind without looking back. The journey to the cabin was an arduous, almost mythic odyssey. First, a bush plane flight to a remote, barely marked gravel strip that didn't appear on most maps. Then, 40 grueling miles on a snow machine through unforgiving wilderness, battling wind, snow, and isolation. When I finally arrived at the site, the cabin looked modest, slightly leaning, exactly as everyone had dismissively described it. Yet it was clearly well-maintained in subtle but telling ways that contradicted its worthless. Label the roof solid, shutters secure, woodpile neatly stacked. Inside, in the flickering firelight of the old barrel stove, I made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was decades of my father's secret. Meticulous survey work, maps, notes, geological data, drill logs, and an assay report revealing a massive mineral deposit beneath the land worth nearly $500 million. My father had known about it for years. He had protected the secret carefully, and he had left it specifically to whichever child cared enough to make the difficult journey north to look. Word of the potential value spread with alarming speed. Calls from resource investors and developers began flooding in. Victor Kane, a smooth representative of a powerful investment fund, reached out directly and made it clear he had already been in contact with Ryan. My brother soon called, his tone shifting from casual to demanding as he insisted we revisit the distribution for fairness before long. He was filing formal legal challenges, claiming undue influence and manipulation. Tyler reappeared unexpectedly at my office in Willow Ridge with flowers and apologies, suddenly very interested. Again, now that there might be significant value attached to my inheritance, I sent him away, seeing him clearly for the first time. Working closely with Sophia Langford, I took decisive, careful legal action. We drafted and recorded a permanent conservation easement and conveyed the mineral rights into a protected charitable trust with strong native corporation stewardship partners. The protections were ironclad. The conference room was thick with tension when we all gathered again. Ryan, Brooke, Tyler, Victor Kane. Teams of lawyers, everyone was present, ready for what they thought would be their victory. I let them all speak first their threats, emotional pleas, financial offers, and bitter accusations. Then I calmly placed the recorded legal documents on the table. The conservation easement, the mineral conveyance to the trust. The land was now permanently protected from any development or extraction. Chaos erupted immediately. Ryan raged uncontrollably. Victor Kane withdrew in cold, calculated silence. Tyler's mask of concern slipped away completely, revealing his true motives. Then, at the height of the storm, the door opened. My parents walked in alive, weathered by months in the wilderness and remarkably calm. The entire inheritance had been a deliberate, carefully constructed test of character. My father had built multiple layers of protection into the trust to safeguard the land. No matter what choices were made, I had already passed the test on my own terms, guided by the values and lessons he had taught me long ago. The land remains untouched and protected to this day. Ryan eventually dropped his lawsuit. Tyler faded from my life entirely. I rebuilt my surveying practice in Willow Ridge with a renewed sense of purpose, helping other landowners create strong, lasting conservation protections for the places they loved. My father, Elias, and I slowly rebuilt our relationship over many quiet evenings and long conversations on the porch as the seasons turned. The wilderness and the land itself taught me what truly matters in this life: stewardship, integrity, and the courage to protect what cannot be replaced. I no longer measure my worth by what others see in me or what I might sell. I measure it by what I am willing to protect. When no one is watching and no reward is promised, that is my story: a weathered cabin in the snow, a brother who measured my value in dollars, and the quiet strength I discovered when everything was on the line. If someone in your life has ever judged you by what you would sell rather than what you would fiercely protect, let this serve as your reminder. Your true worth was never theirs to decide.